This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trevor Sheeran.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are so glad to be joining you again. And today is a bit of a heavy and important topic.
So if you got kids in the car that maybe are 13 years, 12 years, 11 years or younger, maybe wait.
Yeah. Or listen with them and have some discussions.
Or listen, it's not going to be too explicit. But
we're going to try to make this conversation a little bit of an equipping tool for anyone, really, who's able to have a conversation. The topic for today is how to talk to somebody who is suicidal.
And a little shameless plug that if you want a step-by-step guide on this in a couple months, hopefully in a couple months, it's all done. I just need to get out there. My ebook will be coming out on this very topic, and you can find it at mayfieldcounseling.com or also our new website, my new website. Why am I saying our? I'm talking in collective persons here.
It's the royal we.
The royal we. drmayfield.com will be launching in probably about 3 weeks, and there'll be links to that on there too. But I think so listen today, have conversations, but I think also it's going to be really important to have something in hand.
Yeah. And just to denote as well, after listening to this podcast, you are not an expert and you don't get to just go around and find everybody who has suicidality and solve their problems. That's not what we're here to do. We want to make sure that if you are in a situation where you are talking to somebody who is saying, I want to kill myself, I want to go drive off of Pikes Peak or something, that you feel like you know what to do in that situation to get them help and to make sure that they're safe.
Right. And it's interesting. I was talking to my wife yesterday, and we are part of this co-op for homeschooling. And it was interesting how many people at the co-op, pulled her aside to have conversations about this kind of stuff, because it's, and she goes, I'm not a counselor, I'm married to one, but I think because she's been equipped, just through osmosis, being a part of this Mayfield Counseling team for so long and those kinds of things, she was able to walk people through it. Not that anybody that she was talking to yesterday was suicidal, but they had people, friends, neighbors, cousins that were struggling, and what do I do? Yeah. And so I think as a lay person, we need to know these things.
And if you're just walking around on the streets and somebody comes up to you, that's a big, scary situation. Yeah. But if you have a conversation beforehand where it's like, okay, this is the number that you can give them, this is the contacts that you can help them reach out, how to help them do that, it can make it far less scary, even though it will continue to be scary, and it should, because it's a dangerous situation. But keeping it to a level where you at least feel competent enough to engage in that conversation.
Well, and I think one of the things that we can do on our link when we post this on YouTube and on Facebook is to have a basic resource list. Mm-hmm. I think every family, just like, when you go off and you have a babysitter, right? You tell them what restaurant you're going to. And, now, back when I was a kid, it was what restaurant I'm going to, what time we're going to be there, because, we didn't have cell phones. Now, here's my cell phone number. If something happens, just text me, call me. Here's the doctor's number. Here's the emergency number. We prep ourselves for those kinds of things. We don't prep ourselves for this kind of stuff. Yeah. And with the state of our mental wellness and health in Colorado and just in the United States, I think it's a necessary thing that we need to have now as a equipping of, my neighbor kid can't talk to their parents, but they came to me and told me that they're suicidal. Mm-hmm. Crap. What do I do? And that's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit about the origins of this conversation. I think that there are more than two sides, but two sides that immediately come to mind. The side of somebody coming and saying, hey, I want to kill myself, help me.
Right.
And then the side of a person who, maybe three as I'm talking about it, who doesn't say anything.
Sure.
And then I think there's another that we often seem to kind of just pass over because it's an uncomfortable conversation, where somebody might be making jokes or teasing about, I want to die, this is the worst, I'm just going to kill myself. Right. And it's said in a joking manner. But the way we can approach those conversations is to pull them aside afterwards in a safe place and ask, hey, you were making these jokes and I just want to check in on you. Are you okay? I know you were joking,
Right.
but is there something serious to those jokes?
Yes.
And that's a good question to ask.
So I think number one, you've alluded to it, is that when somebody makes a comment, period, we take it seriously. We don't brush it off. We don't laugh with them. We don't just dismiss it.
Yeah.
I think we need to really lean into, okay, we don't joke about that. What's really going on? Or, hey, I've noticed, you're not as happy as you used to be, or things go, I mean, I think a lot of times we find that there are people in circles around individuals that have died by suicide that they're like, I should have asked, or I wish I would have asked, or I wish I would have noticed. And yes, it is a scary concept.
Very.
But I was telling some parents the other night, the alternative is scarier. So lean into the uncomfortability on that.
Totally. And so let's dive in a little bit. We have that conversation, whether it's somebody coming to you and saying, hey, I want to kill myself, or being distant and you approach them, or them joking and you approach them. They say, yeah, I am seriously considering killing myself. What's the next step of that conversation?
This seems mechanical, but if parents want to, or people want to have something that they can follow, I would encourage them of Googling the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, just to have as a guide, because it asks you questions. There's also a resource that we can give you too. It's not geared so much towards the layperson, but it's a suicide assessment by Crossweight Counseling Services up in Denver. We got to meet them a couple weeks ago at a conference, and it's a step-by-step drop-down menu on a computer, a tablet. But I think the next conversation is asking them, or the next question is asking them, do you have a plan? Right? So don't be afraid to ask, are you suicidal? And if they say yes, or do you want to kill yourself? Because sometimes kids were like, suicidal, what do you mean? Like,
right.
I want to die. Okay, you want to die.
Or as the Columbia says it, have you ever thought about doing something that would cause you to no longer be alive?
Right. I mean, so however you want to ask that, but not being afraid to ask that. And then the next the question is so, do you have a plan? Tell me about your plan. And if they say, well, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take a rope, or I'm going to find my parents' gun, or I'm going to take a bunch of pills, or I'm going to drive home and try to hit the meeting. I mean, whatever that might be, now they have a plan. So just because somebody wants, and this is where we need to make a distinction, just because somebody says they want to die doesn't mean necessarily that they're actively suicidal.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we make that assumption. Now, again, don't just dismiss the...
Right. If they say I have a plan, or they don't have a plan, that doesn't mean that the conversation's over. Oh, you're good. Go ahead and have fun.
Exactly. It's, if I want to die but I don't have a plan, the next step would be, okay, let's find, if you're a neighbor or a friend, let's go find a trusted adult, a parent, a teacher, a school counselor, somebody that we can go talk to share how you're feeling. Yep. Youth pastor, whatever that might look like. If it's your own kid, okay, thank you for sharing with me. And then speak love, speak value into them.
Which is so vital. I haven't been working very long as a therapist, and I'm still in my
experience
internship,
though too.
But I have spoken to so many clients recently who have talked about how they approach their parents asking like, hey, are you proud of me? Or doing some sort of test of like, hey, I want you to respond to me in love and kindness. Right. And when they don't, that's their decision. Like, okay, great, I am going to go kill myself. And so much more important when somebody approaches and says, hey, this is what I'm doing. If I'm self-harming, right. I want to kill myself. And being able to respond in a loving and caring way that says, thank you for sharing that with me. I love you. I want good things for you. I want to support you. I want to join with you in this process.
Don't try to fix it or give advice in that moment.
Yeah.
Because that's going to push them away too. But it's more of the, oh man, that sucks.
Right.
Tell me why you're thinking that way. Tell me why you feel that way. Really being curious in those moments.
Mm-hmm. Some of that reflective listening we talked about a while ago.
Right. So just to be clear, somebody comes to you, kid or otherwise, and says that they want to kill themselves, the next question you need to ask is, tell me about your plan. Do you have a plan? Because if they don't, then we'll take you down this path. Yes. If they do, it's a whole different thing. I mean, it's immediate action. It's, okay, We need to find a counselor. We need to call a suicide prevention hotline. We need to get you into the hospital because most individuals that have a plan already know they have the means. And the means is, well, I want to go drive and hit the median. Well, they can't get in the car, right? Because they have a car. That's their means. I want to, I'm going to use a gun and kill myself. Well,
or if you know that they have an allergy to peanuts and they say, I have a jar of peanut butter in the car, that means as well. And I think there's a big difference that we need to make too between crisis and emergency, which is some of what you're talking about.
Sure.
If somebody comes and says they don't have a plan, that may fit better under crisis, where things have gotten to a point where their normal functioning has been affected. And crisis could last up to, 6 weeks, 6 months. Like it's not a forever, but it is a longer amount of time. Whereas an emergency is not only are we probably in crisis, but if we don't do something right now,
there's some detrimental consequences.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good distinction. Crisis would be, okay, do you have a counselor? No, let's go find one.
Yeah.
Right. Have you talked to your youth pastor? No, we probably should do that right now. Have you talked,
Have you told your parents? Do you have some friends or trusted adults?
Yeah. Right. And it's coming up with kind of that 24-hour to 40-hour game plan of, okay, how can we keep you safe for the next 24 to 48 hours?
Yeah.
And that's where you don't need to do that on your own. You need to figure out people. Here's where it gets sticky, though, when it becomes an emergency. We need to go get you evaluated at the hospital. No, I'm not going. Well, your safety is more important right now than anything else, so you're going to call the 911.
Yep. Or if you're on the phone, you can text 911.
Yep. Yes, that's a big distinction. There have been times when I've been on the phone with a counselor and they're on another phone with somebody, the authorities calling a wellness check. One of the things that we don't realize is that as a society, we can actually call a wellness check on a friend that we're concerned about. And a wellness so a wellness check is basically calling, not calling, well, you can call 911 if you don't have any other way to do it, but calling if it's a county, the sheriff's office, if it's a city, it's the police.
Local law enforcement.
In most places, so I know in Colorado Springs, I'm really, really proud of this, that we have a mental health crisis response team, a unit from the sheriff's office that will go out with a deputy and a mental health professional. And the deputy's been trained in all these kinds of things, crisis intervention, mental health, first aid, all this kind of stuff. And they'll go and just check on somebody to make sure they're okay.
Now, Dr. Mayfield, I'm afraid that if I call my friend that for a wellness check, they're going to get arrested.
So that's a good, nice acting there. So I was talking to Officer John Hammond, who is with the not officer, he hurt me on that one. Deputy John Hammond, who is a part of the sheriff's office, and he's a part of the mental health unit here in Colorado Springs. They had, I think, close to 700 calls last year that they responded to, and 1% resulted in being arrested. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Most of it, what he said, the arrests were made because of outstanding warrants, not because of the active mental health crisis. Yeah. So that's also really cool. So if your area, this is where you do research, if your area, wherever you are in the country or the world, has a mental health crisis response team, what does that look like? But to be honest, when you call 911, they're not going to just send out the police.
Right.
They're going to send out fire, paramedic. That's just the standard protocol.
Yep.
And typically, you can share with them, here's what I'm concerned about. Here's what I need you to look at because I can't get there. And
be as specific as you can.
Yeah. And the standard is transportation to the hospital.
Yeah.
The best thing, though, to do is to take him to the hospital yourself if you can.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is important to talk about is maybe a little bit of how we are communicating with that person. Because I think we'll have a list of resources in the description. We'll also have a few at the end of this episode as well for crisis and emergency. Though emergency we talked about is more immediate and extreme action.
Yep.
If teenager comes up to you and says, hey, I'm having these thoughts about killing myself. I don't really want to, but I'm really scared about what I'm feeling or thinking.
Facing or whatever, yeah.
And sometimes it feels like that would be an easier option than what I'm going through. What do we say to that?
Well, I think it goes back to some of our other conversations about being curious, asking questions, getting an understanding of their world and what they're facing right now, asking them what they need from you in that moment. I think a lot of times is a big deal because it empowers them to say, I just need you to listen, or I need you to validate, or, I need advice. But I think some of the biggest problems we find is that we jump into advice mode and they don't need that. They just need to be heard. And even if it makes us feel uncomfortable, this is where, emotional intelligence is so extremely important for us as adults, is that when we sit with somebody that is struggling, we're going to take on some of that stuff. And so how do we process that ourselves without needing to fix it in the moment? And I know a lot of teenagers specifically that go, I just need somebody to listen, to tell me that I'm okay, that I'm not, in their terms, crazy.
Right.
I'm not... whatever.
Yeah. Well, and even normalizing suicidal thoughts, not in a way that says like, oh yeah, that you should be feeling that way, or like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But in a way that says like, you know what you're going through is really hard, and it makes sense that this would seem like an easy way.
Yeah.
Or, there's a lot of people that do feel that way. You're not alone in it. And that can have some comfort, because sometimes teenagers especially won't say anything because they think they're alone in it. They think that they may be the only person that they know who's ever had these thoughts. And that can be really scary.
Well, and I think also, so along with that, right? So normalizing it in the sense that you're not alone, I think creates a lot of cognitive dissonance, like a lot of space margin. But one thing I found that was really interesting, that parents were like, really, you can do that? Don't give them permission. You don't have permission to kill yourself. There are other ways to deal with this. There's a lot of teenagers that are like, oh, really? I thought this was my only out. Well, it's because our society has taught us this. I mean, to freak people out for a second, you can Google 100 ways to die without feeling it.
Yep.
Right. And our kids have access to this kind of stuff, and they think that's the only option. And so they want to do it in a way that's not going to be painful. But guys, telling them you don't have permission to kill yourself, and there's other ways. There's other options.
That's not an option.
And that's not an option. This sucks, but it's not an option. That creates so much dissonance.
And something that happens to an individual who is actively suicidal is this sort of tunnel vision where, that is the only option.
Right.
There's
I thought
nothing
it was.
Else.
Right. You thought it was. I thought it was. Right. I mean, absolutely.
And it wasn't so much that it was like a cognitive choice of, I am going to complete suicide because I don't want to do anything else. It was, I have no other option. There's no other opportunity for me to get out of this situation other than suicide.
Let me rephrase that for a second. Yes, you're right. From your perspective, I don't know of any other options. I don't see any other options. And I think that's where we can help our teenagers go. I be careful of saying I understand, because you're not in their shoes.
Right.
I think you can say, I can see how that feels that way right now, and let me help you explore other options. Yeah. Because you're right. I mean, I think in our minds, and at least in my mind, and I know your mind too, it was like, what else is there? But it's because of our cognitive development, we're not able to effectively see more than like a foot around us.
Right. And the extraordinary distress.
Yes.
So when somebody comes in and says, I can understand why you might feel that way. Let's talk about some other options. What would happen if you didn't? Right. Like what do you think things would be like in like an hour if you didn't?
Or 2 days
or 3 days or 3 days or 2 minutes, and like, hey, what if you come over and we just have dinner together first and talk?
And this is where I think goes back to our suicide prevention curriculum that we've created with Education for a Lifetime, is this just how do we impart love, value, and need into our kid in that moment? Now, or anybody that comes to us. I think it is so simple, but it's so powerful. Love, value, and need. If we can hone in on a couple of those, or even one of those, it gets them thinking about, oh, I am needed.
Yeah.
My sister needs me. My brother, your story, my brother needs me. And we don't really think about that in the moment. Yeah. And so being reminded of those things is huge.
Yeah. And remember too, not to do this alone. Even as counselors, fully licensed counselors in private practice, don't go about this situation alone.
Nope.
There's always more voices in the conversation and more supports that we're trying to surround this individual with. So whether you're a high school student who's talking to a peer, or a parent talking to your child, or a trusted adult talking to a kid or an adult friend,
Right.
don't do it alone.
No.
Don't kind of Lone Ranger this sort of conversation.
No, because it can feel very isolating. And so to break the stigma around these conversations is when we do these things in community and are not ashamed or afraid to go, I need help. Let's figure this out. My kid is, or my neighbor kid is, or, I have a kid at youth group or a kid at whatever, know. And I know, I'm very aware that we're just talking about teenagers right now, 10 to 18-year-olds. And I'm very aware that in our country, the suicide rate among 19 to 36-year-olds is really high as well. So this can, in a lot of ways, can apply to a wide range of individuals as we have those conversations. But yes, don't go it alone, and do your research. And if that means, reading, just because you want to know more, reading my book when it comes out, or looking at the suicide prevention websites and their articles that they have there, or they're going to national NAMI site, where it talks about different resources and family supports. I mean, do your research, and I think that will help you explore and be more comfortable with this topic too.
And if you want more information, you feel free to contact us, candid@mayfieldcounseling.com. One other thing before we end, I want to give out the National Suicide Hotline, which is both for call and text, and you don't necessarily have to be actively suicidal to reach out to this number. They will respond to you in a responsive way, whether or not that's the case. And the number is 1-800-273-8255. I'll put it down at the bottom as well.
You can also call the Colorado Crisis Services here in Colorado. It's 1-844-493-8255. 1-844-493-8255, or you can text TALK to 38255. Talk to 38255, and you're going to actually get connected to a professional counselor when you do that in Colorado here. And it's a new resource that is it's fantastic.
Yeah. And if you're in crisis, or somebody who's in crisis and just need a counseling resource, feel free to reach out to us as well, 719-453-4803. We would love to connect you with a therapist here and give you the support that you need, or the support that a friend needs as well.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us in this topic.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.